When we think of World War II, we picture grim faces peering through gun barrels, weathered veterans charging across muddy fields, and men taking their last breaths on distant shores. But what if I told you there was a side of the war most of us never knew existed? A conflict waged not with lead and gunpowder, but with audacity, illusion, and good old-fashioned showmanship. Welcome to a world where inflatable tanks do battle, where radio waves carry whispers of phantom armies, and where the only gunfire comes from camouflaged speakers. It's the summer of 1944. The Allied troops have landed in Normandy and are pushing hard into France. But progress isn't easy. For every village liberated, for every Nazi gun emplacement destroyed, another seems to pop up. Just as the Americans wonder if they have the strength to push further, they receive an order unlike any other. In a bold move, straight out of a Hollywood film, the U.S. military sets a trap to deceive the Germans. At first, it seems crazy. Involves creating an entire inflatable army, complete with vehicles, equipment, and even sounds. But General George Patton, the man with a plan, is convinced it'll work. He's not wrong. As the Germans take the bait, mistaking inflatable tanks for the real deal, the Allies gain the upper hand. But how did they pull off this audacious stunt, and what role does one man play in it? Before we dive into the world of make-believe warfare, let's meet our man. Let's call him Nick Fury, though his name might actually be William or Bob. That's right, the military had a policy back then. Keep soldiers on edge by concealing their identities. Anyway, Nick Fury wasn't your average soldier. He was an artist, a painter of some renown, too. He displayed his works in galleries, been featured in reputable magazines. You know the type. Then came the call to serve his country. He joined a new unit unlike any other. He was tasked with a mission that sounded like a joke. Create an inflatable army to mislead the Germans. But, jokes aside, the mission was critical. If successful, it could fool the enemy, diverting their troops and resources away from the real Allied forces. So Fury and his fellow artists got to work. They churned out tank after tank, each crafted from rubber and wire. Soon enough, they had an entire army's worth of replicas. But something was missing. Tanks without the rumble of engines and the clatter of chains are just metal hulks. So they worked on sound effects, too. They recorded the sounds of tanks moving, guns firing, and soldiers shouting. Soon, their camps were filled with the din of battle. The final touch was the uniforms. They created convincing outfits for their soldiers, complete with insignia and medals. All set, they waited for the signal, and when it came, they moved fast. By day, they deflated their tanks, hid their equipment, and blended in with the local populace. By night, they pumped up their creations, blasting their recordings and taking up positions. When the Allied troops moved out, the Germans saw them. Planes flew overhead, soldiers marched, and vehicles rumbled. Everything seemed real. So much so that German commanders sent out reconnaissance teams to verify the reports. But the teams kept coming back, baffled. What they saw didn't add up. There were tanks, but no troops. There was activity, but no sign of life. It was as if an army had materialized out of thin air. Of course, there was an explanation. The whole thing was a ruse, a masterclass in deception. Back at headquarters, Patton and his team watched the German response with amusement. As the enemy fell for the trap, committing valuable troops and resources to deal with the phantom force, Patton's real army advanced without much resistance. The campaign continued like this, with Fury and his artistic squad creating inflatable armies wherever the real troops moved. It was risky, but it worked. The Germans never fully caught on. They kept chasing shadows, expending energy and resources that could have been used elsewhere. Yet, as effective as the inflatable army was, it wasn't the only tactic employed. Alongside Fury's creations, other units spread misinformation, infiltrated German networks, and even staged attacks. It was a mix of old-school espionage and modern psychological warfare. But for our story, the inflatable army is the key. It captures the essence of the era, a time when the rules of war were being rewritten. No longer was it just about brute force. Deception, strategy, and psychology played a vital role. As the war progressed, so did the complexity of the deceptions. Entire villages were constructed only to be blown up later, creating diversions and inflicting heavy losses on unsuspecting Germans. Civilians were recruited to pose as locals, guiding lost or captured enemy soldiers. Meanwhile, the Ghost Army, as they came to be known, honed their craft. Each new operation was more daring than the last, from faking entire divisions to staging ambushes with life-sized dummies. But all good things must come to an end. As the war drew closer to its conclusion, the need for inflatable armies diminished. The Allies were on a home stretch, and the Germans, well, they'd seen enough tricks to learn their lesson. However, the legacy of the Ghost Army lived on. Their methods and techniques laid the foundation for modern psychological warfare. And, as the Cold War loomed, the tactics they developed remained classified, only to be revealed decades later. In the post-war era, the men and women who served in the Ghost Army returned to civilian life. Some went back to their art, others pursued different paths. But all of them carried with them the memories of a war unlike any other. It's a quiet hum of an inflatable tank engine, the crackle of walkie-talkies relaying fake orders. It's a camaraderie of a unit that defied the boundaries of conventional warfare. But why haven't you heard of them? Why did their story remain buried for so long? Well, it's a tale that doesn't fit neatly into history books. It challenges the traditional narrative of war as a clash of steel and gunpowder, speaks of a conflict that fought as much in the minds of soldiers as on the battlefields. In a world where information was power, they dared to wield illusions and misdirection as weapons. They were the pioneers of psychological warfare, the original deep thinkers of deception. Their story also raises questions about the nature of heroism. These weren't your typical war heroes. They weren't generals leading massive offensives or soldiers storming enemy trenches. They were artists, entertainers, and everyday people thrust into extraordinary circumstances. They answered the call, proving that courage isn't confined to a select few, that it can emerge from the most unexpected corners. The Ghost Army faded into obscurity for decades. Their story lay dormant, hidden in archives, and locked in the memories of those who served. But their methods lived on, shaping the strategies of future conflicts, influencing the information age itself. In a world dominated by social media and virtual realities, their story resonates anew. We live in an age of curated images and carefully crafted narratives. And who better to understand the power of perception than the ghosts themselves? As the veil of secrecy lifts, revealing their contributions, we're reminded that war isn't just about physical battles. It's a conflict of ideas, information, and audacity. The Ghost Army showed us that sometimes the greatest victories are won not by brute force, but by the clever manipulation of the very fabric of reality itself. It's a lesson worth remembering in our times. Now, did you find this video interesting? Do you want to know more about World War II or other historical events? Please subscribe and leave a comment below. We would love to hear your thoughts.